On this video, I want to discuss a little bit the Shirat HaYam, the song that the Jewish people sang when we were redeemed from the Egyptians, saved from immediate danger. I'm sure if the Egyptians did, Chas v'Shalom, capture the Jewish people, they wouldn't just bring us back to slavery. There would probably be a lot of executions, and the conditions would be even worse than before had the Egyptians been able to catch us. But the great deliverance that when the Jewish people walked through the sea and the Egyptians drowned, that deliverance caused Moshe and the Jewish people to sing the song. And we read the song every single day in the morning as part of so-called Psuki de Zimra. This wasn't always part of Psuki de Zimra. It's a part of prayer in the beginning of the morning prayer where we mostly recite certain psalms, in particular the 6 last psalms of the book of Psalms from 145th to 150th includingly. And after this, we'll also say a certain passage from Nehemiah, and then the song at the sea. This is the main part of Psuki de Zimra. Now, it wasn't always part. The Shirat HaYam wasn't always part of the song, but eventually, close to the end of the period of Rishonim, maybe 600 years ago, practically all the congregations accepted as part of the morning prayers, and it's in all our Siddurim and our prayer books. So that's why most Orthodox Jews remember the song more or less by heart, since we recite it every single day. Of course, the language is very complex and poetic, but I want to discuss a certain Halachik aspect. Interestingly enough, the main book of Halacha for the Ashkenazic Jews, which is Mishna Berura, written by Rabbi Israel Meir HaKohen, known also as Chafetz Chaim, after a different book that he wrote. So Mishna Berura discusses certain points about how to recite, how to pronounce certain words in this song, and that's what I want to discuss on this little video, on this short video. One point that he makes is that there is a dispute about where to end the song. There is this one verse at the end, Kiva sus paro birichbo, etc. In most of our Siddurim, it's printed, and the tradition to recite it as part of the song is based on Arizal. And in fact, Ibn Ezra, among the commentators of the Torah, thinks that it's part of the song. And in fact, the Vilna Gaon said that we don't need to recite this every day as part of the morning prayers. So apparently he's following Ramban that Kiva sus paro birichbo is not part of the song, and it shouldn't be recited. So this is one detail that the Mishna Berura mentions. All of this is in one little passage of Mishna Berura in 51st chapter, 17th paragraph. So I'm just translating piece by piece. So the first discussion is where to end the song, and also whether we should say the Aramaic translation of the last or pre-last verse, Hashem yimloch le'olam va'ed. Then the Chafetz Chaim writes about a number of words that should be pronounced a certain way with dagesh. Dagesh, in this particular case, makes the sound somewhat different. Of course, there are two types of dageshes. I'm not going to go into the grammar right now, but the entire passage here that Mishna Berura brings is taken from Beit Yosef, from Rabbi Yosef Karo's commentary to the Tur. The main author, the first author of the Shulchan Aruch, our main code of law, is Rabbi Yosef Karo. And then there are certain notes added by Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles. So Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote, before he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, the main code of Jewish law, he wrote a commentary on the Tur, and that's called Beit Yosef, the house of Yosef. And in that book, he writes, and this is what the Mishna Berura quotes, that in certain cases we don't follow the normal grammar rules. This is really in the text of the Torah again. This is not just a prayer. It's a prayer taken from the Torah. So there are reasons why the Balei Misorah, the Jewish grammarians, had this tradition of sometimes putting a dagesh where it would seem grammatically doesn't belong. I'll give one example of this. There are a few here, which words are pronounced with a dagesh, with a stronger sound. So, for example, we say yidmu ka'aven, not yidmu ha'aven. Normally, by the normal grammar rules, the kaf should be without a dagesh, so it's chaf, yidmu ha'aven. What's the reason we don't say it like that? So the explanation given is as follows: that when you're pronouncing the words, a lot of times it's not exactly clear where the previous word ends and the next word begins. Some syllable may become part of the, move to kind of becoming the part of the next word instead of the previous word, especially when you're pronouncing things quickly. So if you was to say yidmu ha'aven, ha may become part of the previous word. It would sound like saying yidmu ha'aven. And that's what they call chiruf v'giduf. It's a terrible thing to say. It's as if you're saying to Hashem, you'll be compared to a stone, chas v'shalom. So this is a kind of thing that a kind of blasphemy of sorts. So that's why the sages had this tradition that you have to be very careful that something like this wouldn't sound. So that's why we say ka'aven. So ka is clearly a new word, usually in the beginning of the word that the dagesh is put. So yidmu ka'aven. And then Mishna Berura goes on, and this is my main point of this little video, and he says that in the verse Mayim Adirim, this is the 10th verse of 15th chapter of the book of Shemot. In this song, there is a verse which ends on Tzalaluka Feret B'Mayim Adirim. The word Adirim should be, you have to make a little pause before the word Adirim. Why is that? Because he says the word Adirim does not go on the previous word. It's not Maim Adirim. Water, that's Adirim. I'm going to get to this in a moment, what exactly the word Adirim means. But the point of Mishna Berura is that you have to separate the word Adirim from the previous word. I'll make a little pause, because Adirim is going on the Egyptians, not on the waters. What does the verse actually say? It says that the Egyptians sank like lead in the waters that are Adirim. That would be the simple pshat, right? Adirim presumably would mean that the waters are mighty. So the Egyptians sank in mighty waters. But according to Mishna Berura, and this he's quoting from a certain commentary called Prima Gadim. This is a very interesting commentary. It's not a commentary to Shulchan Aruch, to the main code of Jewish law. It's a commentary to the commentaries of Shulchan Aruch, what they call super commentary. So the earlier two commentaries to Shulchan Aruch were called Magen Avram and Taz. Magen Avram means the shield of Avram, and Taz means Turi Zahav. These two people lived more or less 400 years ago, like a couple of generations after the Shulchan Aruch. Maybe a century after Shulchan Aruch approximately. So their commentaries were the most accepted and early commentaries to Shulchan Aruch, and Prima Gadim is trying to explain those commentaries. Now, the author of Mishna Berura quotes Prima Gadim literally thousands of times. It may be the most quoted work in the entire Mishna Berura. Quotes, of course, a lot of different sources, but Prima Gadim was one of his beloved sources. He quotes him a lot, and in particular on the grammar issues. I don't think the Chofetz Chaim was a grammarian. Grammar in general is not really part of the curriculum of most yeshivot or Batei Midrashim. Generally, Sephardim are more knowledgeable in grammar on average. But there are some specialists in grammar, of course, among Ashkenazim too, but presumably the Chofetz Chaim, the education he received and what he learned was not at least centering, was not concentrating on grammar. Of course, every Orthodox Jew knows some grammar, the minimal grammar. I mean, when you learn Rashi on the Chumash, the main commentaries, certainly if you learn Ibn Ezra, you'll learn some grammar, but it's never the core curriculum. It's never the main thing. So it seems that the Mishna Berura was generally quoting on the grammar issues, generally quoting other sources. Whatever was written by the accepted books, he just quotes it. So in this case, it's not a question to Mishna Berura, it's more a question to Prima Gadim. So Prima Gadim, by the way, also is quoting a different book, as always, right? One book is quoting another book, and what Prima Gadim is trying to say is that the word Adirim is as if there would be a comma before it, meaning Tzelelu ka'aferet b'mayim, the Egyptians drowned like lead in the water, and Adirim means the Egyptians, meaning who drowned like lead? Adirim, the mighty ones. Tzelelu ka'aferet b'mayim, Adirim. That would be the pronunciation according to the author of Mishna Berura and Pri Megadim and others. What's the proof that Pri Megadim brings? Now, of course, Mishna Berura doesn't bring any of these proofs. Pri Megadim is a longer work than Mishna Berura, and he brings the following proofs. It's in the name of a book called Dat Chachma, some other book that he's quoting. I don't know what that book is. So he says, first of all, the tam. We have in the Torah kind of musical notes that. One of the things, of course, it tells us how to read the various verses. The verses are read in a kind of musical tone. Everything is with musical notes. But on top of it, it tells us a lot about where the commas are, where the pauses are. Sometimes even connect the words, sometimes even separate the words. So the phrases based on tamim become more clear, because a lot of times there's a difference depending on where you make the pauses, where the comma is. There's a difference in meaning, just like here. Is Adirim going on the Mayim Adirim, or is Mayim kind of the end of a phrase, and then Adirim is after kind of comma? So the first proof is based on Tamim. He says that the Tam here, they call this Tam Tzipcha. I'm not a big specialist, by the way, in Tamim. It's a whole separate wisdom, but I know a little bit about Tamim. But Tzipcha is a kind of separation Tam in a sense. It doesn't connect to the next word. So you make a little pause after the word Mayim based on this Tzipcha. And Adirim is a separate word at the end of the verse. And the second proof he brings is from the following Kabbalistic Agada that's in our Talmud, in the Tractate Menachot. On 53rd page, there's this Agada that seems like it's a play on words, but there is much more in it. In fact, there's a tradition that the Vilna Gaon thought that the entire Kabbalah Varizal is hinted in this Agada. Of course, Agada is much longer here, but the piece that he's quoting is the following interesting piece. It says, "Let Adir come and punish Adirim for the sake of Adirim through Adirim." So what is it talking about? Then it brings different verses to show that Hashem is called Adir, God himself is called mighty. This word may have other connotations, by the way, but I'm just using the simplest translation now. So Hashem is Adir. Let him come and punish the Egyptians that are called Adirim for the sake of Jews who are also called Adirim in a certain place, and through the waters which are called Adirim. And which verses does this Agada bring to prove that the Egyptians are called Adirim? It brings the verse from our Shirat HaYam. On the other hand, to bring that the waters are Adirim, it brings a different verse, I think in Tehillim and Psalms. So presumably, right, if the word Adirim in our verse would mean mighty waters, it would have brought that verse to prove that the waters are mighty. But instead it uses that verse to prove that the Egyptians are mighty. So that's the second proof that this book Dat Chachma brings, and Pri Megadim brings from in his name. The second proof that Adirim is going on Egyptians, not on waters. Now, what's really interesting is that there's this Halachik midrash to our book of Shemot. It's called Mechilta, and in Mechilta, indeed, it brings our verse, the verse from Shirat HaYam, and the word Adirim in it, brings it as a proof that the waters are mighty. And the fact that Egyptians are mighty, it brings from a different verse from Yecheskel. So it would seemingly mean that even according to Chazal, there were different rabbis who thought differently. There was an alternative opinion according to which Adirim is going on the waters, not on the Egyptians. Moreover, a lot of the commentators, according to the simple pshat of this verse, understand Adirim, in fact, to mean mighty waters. I would say that any commentator that didn't write anything on this word would presumably mean that Adirim is waters, because that's the intuitive assumption. I would say that any Hebrew speaker who will read this verse will read it as Mayim Adirim, mighty waters. It's only the those commentators who specifically say that the Adirim is going on the Egyptians, they, of course, believe that that's the case. But those who didn't say anything, by default, would mean that they assume that Adirim is the waters, because that's the intuitive assumption. If you want to say such a chidush that there is like a big comma here, a big pause, and Adirim is going on the Egyptians, you'd have to say that explicitly. It's not the default, I'm saying. So a number of commentators say that Adirim is in fact waters. For example, Sforno, Malbim, that Adirim is Egyptians. That's Sforno and Malbim. But a number of commentators also explicitly say that Adirim is waters. That's Rashbam, Bechor Shor, and a number of other commentators. But my point is that even all those commentators who didn't say anything presumably also believe that Adirim is waters. Rashi doesn't say anything in this verse. Presumably he believed that Adirim is waters. And that seems to be the translation into Aramaic, the Targum Onkelos. Moreover, there is a proof brought from Rashi on Sefer Shoftim, in fact, from our Haftorah, this weekly Haftorah, where it also seems that Rashi explains in our verse that Adirim means the mighty waters. What's really interesting, I found, is the translations of Art Scroll. Now, Art Scroll Siddur is probably the most widespread, the most accepted Siddur among English-speaking Jews and Russian-speaking Jews. And the English translation of Art Scroll follows the Mishna Berura and explains that it's the Egyptians who are mighty. So the English translation of Art Scroll is like this: the mighty ones sank like lead in waters. But guess what? The Russian translation of Art Scroll, which is done by a different company, it was done by a Chabad company called Shamir. And they first translated the Chabad Siddur Shirat HaYam and then used it as a base to translate the Art Scroll hired them, but they're the ones who translated it into Russian. And there, the translation, in fact, explains that it's the waters that are mighty. So where does it all lead us? I'm assuming that the majority of people don't know about the whole issue unless they learned Mishna Berura and understood what he's trying to say. Then most people presumably are saying what, like I said, the intuitive pronunciation is Mayim Adirim, and that's what they mean by it, mighty waters. But probably some people, especially those who have the Art Scroll Siddur with English translation, or the Art Scroll Chumash with English translation, the Art Scroll Chumash also follows this opinion. They presumably understand that according to Mishna Berura, a pause has to be made, and we're talking about mighty Egyptians. In the end of the day, of course, this is not a crucial point. This is just an interesting example. Even such comparatively minor issues are important enough for the sages to discuss. And in the end, I want to say that the last thing the Mishna Berura says in this paragraph is that we should read the Shirat HaYam with joy, as if we ourselves passed through the sea. It happened just to us on that day. With that kind of an excitement, we should be saying the great deliverance, and the person who says it will have his sins forgiven, and may we see again miraculous salvation of our people like in those days. And if you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.